Tim Walz is now under investigation for his complicity in Minnesota's Somali welfare fraud scandal. The Somalis in Minnesota are taking down everybody with them because, as we speak, Minnesota's Attorney General was also exposed for receiving campaign donations from several people convicted in the Feeding Our Future fraud. And last but not least, 2 people in Minnesota were just arrested for their role in a massive voter fraud operation in Minnesota funded by taxpayer dollars. As always, like the video and subscribe to the channel. You're going to want to stick around for this. There's a lot to cover. But let's start with a clip that lays the groundwork for this entire video. Here's Tim Walz replacing the old state flag of Minnesota with a new one that eerily resembles the flag of Somalia.
Whoa, wait a minute. There, that's better.
So I'm gonna have my editor do some magic. Here's the old flag of Minnesota. Here's the new flag of Minnesota, and here's the flag of Somalia. And they look similar, right? But not exactly the same. Well, that's because of the massive backlash they received from the first mock-up of the new flag design, which looks like this. And that one is basically identical to a Somali flag in a province called Jubaland, which looks like this. Now, both Tim Walz and the designer of the new Minnesota flag claim it wasn't inspired by Somalia in any way. But an article covering the controversy of the flag change seems to allude to the fact that that isn't quite true. It reads, Governor Walz did not have a seat on the commission and did not have approval over the flag design or adoption. Cassandra Knudsen, a spokesperson for Minnesota Secretary of State Stephen Simon, a voting member of the commission, told PolitiFact in an email. Walz appointed 3 of the commission's 13 voting members, including its vice chair. A Walz spokesman did not return a request for comment. The governor has criticized the state's old flag as problematic. He said of the new flag, "We've evolved into a more diverse state, and I think it's more reflective of that." AKA, our state is the Somali capital of America, so they deserve a flag that represents them. But let's check out this Fox report talking about Tim Walz being under investigation for allegedly knowing and covering up the Somali scam, and then we'll get into the post that exposed him.
Why are tax dollars, if you live in Minnesota, you're going to work, you're working really hard, some of your paycheck is going to benefit, according to this investigation, a terrorist organization.
Including the pandemic aid.
That's exactly right.
So the pandemic aid, this governor not only allowed the riots to go crazy with George Floyd, when the money came flooding in, he had no idea where it was going. When whistleblowers stood up and said, this is fraudulent, this is fake, this money's going to the wrong people, he went after the whistleblowers.
So this investigation was prompted after the Manhattan Institute exposed that funds stolen by the Somali community in Minnesota were being funneled to the Al-Shabaab terrorist group back in Somalia. And this allegation was corroborated by a New York Times report that exposed that this systemic widespread fraud was being enabled by people in the highest positions in Minnesota government. That article was then verified by the Minnesota Staff Fraud Reporting X account that dropped a bombshell revelation that Tim Walz wasn't just ignoring and allowing the fraud, but also silencing and threatening whistleblowers who were trying to expose it. The post reads, Tim Walz is 100% responsible for massive fraud in Minnesota. We let Tim Walz know of fraud early on, hoping for a partnership in stopping fraud, but no, we got the opposite response. Tim Walz systematically retaliated against whistleblowers, using monitoring, threats, repression, and did his best to discredit fraud reports. Instead of partnership, we got the full weight of retaliation by Tim Walz, certain DFL members, and an indifferent mainstream media. It's scary, isolating, and left us wondering who we can turn to. In addition to retaliating against whistleblowers, Tim Walz disempowered the Office of the Legislative Auditor, allowing agencies to disregard their audit findings and guidance. Media and politicians supporting Tim Walz or the DFL agenda attacked whistleblowers who were trying to raise red flags on fraudulent activities. This is a cascade of systemic failures leading up to Tim Walz. Agency leaders appointed by Tim Walz willfully disregarded rules and laws to keep fraud reports quiet. even to the extent of threatening families of whistleblowers. These same leaders are not qualified for their jobs, instead getting leadership jobs via Tim Walz's friendship, so state government were left floundering. DFL lawmakers refused to acknowledge fraud and deflected any serious conversation to stop fraud. Biased mainstream media showed absolutely no interest in covering fraud happening in our state. Programs, especially in behavioral health and disability services, were built without any guardrails against fraud, all in an attempt to extract more funding from the legislator and the federal government. And here's a post from this same account on September 11th of last year, warning Kamala Harris not to pick Tim Walz as her VP. It says, "Ms. Harris, please listen to Minnesota state employees who work every day to deliver best services possible to our state and people who expect no less and pay our wages. Tim Walz has caused incredible harm to our state and agencies, retaliated against whistleblowers against fraud."